Prime Minister Starmer is always going to have will be at the front of the line or close to the front of the line when it comes to people that the Americans turn to. But I have to say, he doesn't come across as um, someone that could lead the rest of Europe, perhaps. And President Macron also seems to be in some his own domestic challenges, and so that's why I feel like the center of gravity is shifted to the east.
And of course, the election of Donald Trump has raised questions in Europe as to how it will continue to support Ukraine should the US want to stop doing so. Which European leaders do you think, and are you looking to be the most persuasive towards the president when he comes into his job?
I think that there's kind of a shift of the center of gravity of security and defense in Europe that's moving towards the east, and it would be leaders like Alex Stubb from Finland, Donald Tusk from Poland. I think Prime Minister Meloni from Italy is a real force. And I believe that after the elections in Germany in February, we're going to see Friedrich Merz as the new Bundeskanzler. Um, I think he will change the trajectory of Germany when it comes to security policy. And so it's sort of that tier of leaders that if they come together could probably make a compelling case to a Trump administration said, look, don't turn your back on us. We still need an American nuclear deterrent, particularly since none of those four countries have nuclear weapons, unlike UK and France. But they all or three of the four, are investing heavily in defense. Italy will soon be one of the biggest spenders on the continent. So they could compel or convey to the president, don't turn your back on us, but we will pick up a lot of the slack on Ukraine, but we still need American leadership. Obviously, Prime Minister Starmer is always going to have will be at the front of the line or close to the front of the line when it comes to people that the Americans turn to. But I have to say, he doesn't come across as um, someone that could lead the rest of Europe, perhaps. And President Macron also seems to be in some his own domestic challenges, and so that's why I feel like the center of gravity is shifted to the east.
And all of this, and you have said so before, that China is watching. You've made that point often, watching the support the West gives to Ukraine, the extent to how it pushes back against Russian aggression. It will also be interested in the terms of any negotiations that it's agreed to end the war. At this stage, what do you think its assessment is?
At this stage, I think China believes that we don't have the political will to decisively stop Russia. That we have failed to deter Russia from continuous airspace violations, sabotage of cables, disinformation, um, just this constant churn of bad behavior by the Russians, and we've done is shake our fist at it. We've done nothing to inflict real pain. We've done nothing to stop Russia from exporting oil and gas to China and India. And so I think that the Chinese must see that we still don't have the political will to do what's necessary to help Ukraine win, to defend sovereignty, to defend freedom of navigation, to defend international law. And I think the Chinese could draw the conclusion that we won't have that will in the Indo-Pacific region either, where it's much more difficult to actually do anything.
And since you mentioned undersea cables, the suspicion has fallen on a Chinese ship in the area of the Baltic Sea when undersea internet cables were damaged a couple of days ago. Not the first time that the Baltic's infrastructure has been damaged. It happened in 2022 with the destruction of the three Nord Stream pipelines between Russia and Germany. It's really important, though, isn't it, to find out who or what was responsible for these kind of incidents, because otherwise there's never any accountability. There's a plausible deniability, and I'm just wondering how that is possible and how you do it. You can point the finger with credibility when you've got one part of the world saying black is white and the other side saying white is black.
Well, and there are other incidents where the cable between mainland Norway and Svalbard Island was also cut. I mean, these things are happening so often. I was speaking to officers earlier today from Scandinavian countries, and they are very familiar with the Russian tactic of having a submarine that moves underneath a ship to avoid detection. And they get out there, and we know the Russians have the capability to deploy even smaller submarines to cut cables to do this kind of thing. And so the awareness is greater, and they're investing time and resources into protecting this underwater infrastructure, but it's very difficult. And I think that what we're going to see is increased cooperation among the Baltic nations. Um, but the I think we need to be more uh, we need to be tougher in our accusation. This is not a criminal court where you've got to have, you know, incontrovertible evidence that it was Russia or that it was China. The fact is, one of those two is associated with every one of these things. Now, I was impressed. Reports yesterday that the Danish Navy went out and approached the Chinese ship. I heard today, I can't confirm it, that the Danish Navy actually boarded this ship. This is what we need is for allies in the region to be willing to take those kinds of steps to hold them accountable. We may get it wrong a couple of times. So what? The fact is, they need to. Right now, they don't fear that they'll ever be caught.
Just really interested to get your perspective on the US agreement to supply anti-personnel landmines to Ukraine, which could slow Russia's advances in the east of Ukraine. It has been heavily criticized by humanitarian organizations. They say they were banned in 1997 by the Mine Ban Treaty. Why can they, and are they being offered now?
Well, I think that you have to look at the situation. Ukraine is fighting for its life. It has a very long border with an enemy that has tens of thousands of troops and is seemingly willing to keep expending those troops, trying to overwhelm Ukrainian defenders. I think this is entirely a legitimate use of a weapon to defend themselves against Russia. And I think that the biggest concern about various types of landmines is that if they stay in the ground forever, or that if there's a high dud rate or something like that, that you end up creating a real safety hazard for farmers, for children. All true. That's absolutely true. There is a danger to that. There's no denying that. I would say that what has been provided are a type of capability that has a very low dud rate. It is not the worst case, but I can feel even as I'm trying to explain it, people will be going like, "What?" So there's no denying that there will be a risk. But at this point, this is where you say the greater importance is helping Ukraine defend itself against Russia and its unprovoked attack.
And it's 1,000 days since February the 24th, 2022, or just over this week. It was an opportunity to reflect on the devastation, the suffering that's being caused in all of those days. 1 million people have been killed and wounded. And I was listening to a young woman the other day on the streets of Kyiv, and putting it bluntly, just saying that everybody knows somebody who's been killed or who's been maimed by this war. And you don't just get you can't get it unless you're actually living through this. And in Russia itself, the Times newspaper, that it's reporting that Russians are turning to alcohol, and that they've had a record 1.84 billion liters of vodka being sold between January and October this year. Now, and you can say that they're not comparable, those kinds of suffering, but it does look like everybody is losing right now.
Well, yes, in a way, I can see why you would say it like that, but I would not say that Russians are turning to alcohol. I mean, they're pretty famous for that having been a part of their lifestyle and culture for a long time. Nonetheless, the biggest loser will be the country that fails to defend itself, and for us who don't help Ukraine defend themselves. This war started 100% because Russia invaded it. This was unprovoked. And I think, we have to think about what really is important for us. If Ukraine fails, there will be millions more Ukrainian refugees going into Western Europe. If Ukraine fails, the continued disruption of grain and oil and gas shipments will continue to affect prices in UK, in the US, and across Europe. If Ukraine fails, you could end up in a situation where NATO countries come face to face with Russia, which means a broader war. And if Ukraine fails, it will be because we allowed it to fail. And the Chinese will say, okay, the West does not have the political will to defend what it claims is so important.
And you've made the point that the real date is more than 6,600 days since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea. That was when you were Commander US Army Europe. Did you ever foresee at that moment the potential for this to become what it looks like it is today, is an era-defining conflict?
Well, of course, I did get called out after I tweeted that number that my math was off by a couple of thousand days,
Oh,
which is true. But yes, Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014, and I think it's important that we date the beginning of this conflict from 2014 because Ukraine has been fighting against Russian forces since that time, and the large scale invasion, of course, is when it got to such high intensity began in February 22. So thank you for reminding that this war has been going on quite a long time. I did not um, I couldn't tell or didn't realize it would be going on 10 years later when it started in 2014. I was pretty sure that the Russians were never ever going to live up to any agreement under the Minsk process. I mean, we saw that we had American, British, Canadian troops that were in Ukraine helping to train Ukrainians beginning back as early as I think 2015. So we were watching this. In fact, we even changed our own training because we saw what the Ukrainians were dealing with against the Russians. So it caused us to change how we approached war fighting and to help kind of shake us out of our um, counterterrorism mindset. But I didn't. I think I did not anticipate the ferocity of the air and missile strikes against civilian targets that we have seen.
You're obviously, as I said at the beginning, you're retired from your post now, retired general. What keeps you supporting Ukraine? What motivates you to be a strong advocate?
Well, obviously, their story, what we see of Ukrainians, the resilience of the population, their determination, that's inspiring. But what keeps me focused on it is what I had said earlier about why this is important for us, why this is important for the United States, for the UK, for the rest of Europe. This uh, the refugees that will come pouring in and will affect the European economies, the potential for a war spreading to include NATO countries, which means all of us will then be in it. The perception by China, all of these things have long-term ramifications for our security and our prosperity. Ukraine is bearing the brunt of this, and all we have to do is decide we want them to be successful, and I think that's what we ought to be doing.
Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, thank you so much for talking to us. Our audience always loves seeing you and hearing your thoughts. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for the privilege, Kate.
You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Chabot. If you'd like to be the first to get exclusive content, you can sign up for membership with the link below. You can also listen to Times Radio for the latest news or read it on thetimes.com. My thanks to our producer today, Louis Sykes, and to you for watching. Bye for now.